Mass immigration is making Britain worse. We've had the fastest population rise since the 70s. Our population grew by 1% in the last year alone to 68.3 million. And they're just the ones who are here legally. This impacts every single aspect of our lives. Education. 2 in 3 special needs schools are overcrowded, so children with special needs are suffering. For normal schools, class sizes are predicted to rise to 60 pupils per class, and 9 in 10 teachers warn that this will damage a child's education. In Bristol, they've had to use porta cabins as overflow classrooms. In Wales, pupils are being turned down for places in their local school despite living in the catchment area. If you just Google School Places UK, it's full of articles like this. Parents in Sussex complaining about not enough school spots. It's right across the country. That's population growth there, destroying education and ultimately making the next generation thicker. Healthcare. More than 21 million GP appointments involved a wait longer than 22 days between July 2021 and December 2023. The NHS waiting lists were above 7.5 million in June. Here's a video of a queue outside a new NHS dentist surgery in Bristol. And, well, let's take a little look at it and see what you notice there. Lots of people, isn't it? Lots of people. Yep. Well, they're all just waiting for a dental practice. It turns out, by the way, that it's expected to become normal scenes like this if NHS dentists take on more patients. So, kids are getting thicker, and now we're all getting sicker. On housing, the UK housing crisis needs a London-sized city to fix it. We have a city the size of Leeds here illegally and another 250,000 people waiting for some kind of asylum claim or appeal. And people wonder why the birth rate is falling. Because, frankly, a lot of British people don't want to have a child when they're squeezed into a bedsit that they already can't afford. The economy. 1.6 million unemployed migrants costing us £8.5 billion a year. And according to the Centre for Policy Studies, migrants from the Middle East, North Africa and Turkey aged between 25 and 64 are almost twice as likely to be economically inactive as someone born in the UK. On crime, foreign criminals are twice as likely as British passport holders to be arrested. The arrest rate for foreign nationals averaged 22.2 per 1,000 of the population, compared to 10.3 per 1,000 for British citizens. So look, mass migration is hammering healthcare, the education system, public safety, the housing market and the economy. But, of course, it's all worth it, isn't it, for the lovely, lovely food? Let's get our thoughts on my panel this evening. We've got Esther Krakow, haven't we, there, who is, of course, a columnist and broadcaster. I've also got Stephen Wolfe, the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and Jonathan List, journalist and chief eye roller this evening. Stephen, look, you've seen your job title, I suppose, so I'll go to you first on this. There's various different aspects there of our lives that appear to be directly linked negatively to mass migration, or is that unfair?
No, it's not unfair. Population is a massive driver of how governments have to assess education, health, infrastructure, roads, taxation. All of those are impacted by the numbers of people that live in this country. And so, as individuals in this country, you have to ask yourself, how do I live here and live a nice, good, comfortable life? If, as we now know very clearly from the ONS, which is not a political organisation, accepts that net migration has forced this country to have the fastest growth in population, that is also having a direct impact on our population. What do you see? What you see is our government now having to tax us more to fund something that was so obvious in the first place. Mass migration makes the country poorer.
Are you worried about the rate of population growth, do you think, in relation to our public services?
I don't actually understand why talking about this is so controversial. If you have 1 million people moving into this country over the last 2 years, and yet you haven't built a single more mile of road, or doctors are facing increasing pressure because literally the population that they've had to deal with have just increased in orders of magnitude that they're not prepared to handle. Or our public services, for example, haven't received the amount of investment they should, even for a population that stayed stagnant 20 years ago. And then you now worsen that situation with the amount of population increase we've seen. I mean, it's just common sense. I don't really understand why, and I hate this word, but I don't really understand why we get into this toxic debate about, oh, you don't like immigrants, or you're being hostile to foreigners or whatever.
It's just a load of different facts.
I'm sorry, like, you cannot maintain a good thing if you choose to deliberately undermine the things that make it work.
Can we make it clear here? This is about population growth.
Yeah.
So it's irrespective of what nationality people comes from. And that must be the part that's part of this debate. It's about the size of the population.
But so, Jonathan, you know, what Esther said there, which is that this isn't particularly controversial and that you can't, what was it, maintain a good thing.
You can't have 20 people living in a 10-bedroom house. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, so what would be your retort to that then?
Well, for something that's not very important, there seems to be a remarkable obsession with it.
What do you mean it's not important?
Well, no, I thought. What was the first thing you said that Esther had said? I thought you said that she'd said something about.
I said it's not a racial issue. It's just a numbers issue. We have too many people, and we just can't cope.
It's about population growth.
I've always said that immigration, the only limit on immigration in this country should be a capacity issue. I don't think that we've reached the capacity of immigration or anything like it. You go outside of any major city in Britain and there's open countryside, and that's not all green belt. There's not all areas of outstanding natural beauty. There is plenty of areas in this country where we can build new towns if necessary, plenty of new infrastructure. We are now seeing a situation in Britain where there are more people dying than being born. Yes. If it hadn't been for migration, the population of this country would have actually gone down.
But you can argue that people might be having more kids, mightn't they? If they felt as though there were more school places, they had a better place to live, there was a better quality of life.
Well, if we actually valued childcare and sort of invest in that and actually incentivise people to have kids, we can certainly have that conversation.
But Jonathan, if we did not have to spend the taxation on the increasing effect of mass migration and large population growth, we would have more money to be able to spend on a smaller population that would be able to work with it. And that's a very clear economic factor. And even finally, the Treasury is beginning to accept that because of the implication of large-scale migration is having a negative impact on people, with GNP per capita making us poorer each year. We're £100 worse off just because of population growth than we were last year.
Stephen, there are many, many economists and immigration experts
who
will
I have a question.
And you actually say that migration has driven up wages.
I have a genuine question. Do you see any link between mass immigration or high levels of immigration or unsustainable levels of massive immigration, population increase and worsening public services? Do you see any link there at all, or housing or anything like that? Or is it just, you know...
No, I see the failure of public services in this country as a result of the last Conservative government in particular's deliberately underfunding of public services.
And I think that's the problem.
Driving them into the ground.
And I think that's the big divide. Those who just look at public services only because it's an impact of the Conservative government not being able to spend enough have a blind spot that do not accept that population growth driven by mass immigration has that mass impact. And until they make themselves the alignment on that, we're only going to get worse.
Stephen, aside from the fact that I think migration, as I've said a million times, and will say it till I'm blue in the face, migration is an unqualified good. I will argue it to the day I die, that migration is a very, very good thing. And it's also been a consistent in human history since humans came into.
But you also say, Jonathan, with respect, mate, you also say that we haven't hit the capacity point, but then your argument was the reason why we don't think we've hit capacity point is because there's loads of fields in Britain that we can build on.
I'm saying that you said Britain is full. I'm saying Britain is not full. We can come back to look, Patrick. We can have a conversation.
England's full.
Patrick, we can have a conversation in 20 years' time about whether we've reached capacity. But the fundamental point is that we, aside from the fact that I'll argue for migration on ideological grounds, we need migrants to actually fund those public services that we were just talking about. Without those migrants coming to work in our public services, they'd be even worse.
I fundamentally disagree. I think there is a way that you can have managed migration into a country by actually increasing productivity, by ensuring that you have services that work to the population as a whole, rather than necessarily importing people. It encourages training. It involves encouraging more people into work and remaining.
It's also a lie that we're getting richer or the country is benefiting economically from having mass migration. It's categorically a lie. It's just not true.
It's just untrue.
So what would you do? What would you do, Esther? Would you put a fixed cap on it? What would you do?
Well, yeah. Gosh, what would I do? First of all, a cap on immigration, depends on the industry. But I think overall, actually sticking to certain numbers and trying to bring them down every year is sensible. I'm sorry, you need to clean up Britain's foreign prison population. That's just common sense. We need to actually, I don't want to use the word raid because it's quite emotive, but we need to deport illegal immigrants. I think the most recent report from an Oxford study was 750,000.
Yeah,
I mean, that's actually, last year it was around 1 million. So if it's somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million, that's just not acceptable. We need to actually deport more. But we actually have to encourage people to want to stay, because we're talking about net immigration, right? We're not talking about people that have left, right? Who are we replacing the British people that have left with?
Well, this is it. But, Stephen, in order to make this level of population growth work, we're going to have to dedicate basically all of our time and energy to consistently building new hospitals, new schools, new houses, 24/7.
With an economy that's
basically
growing.
forever. And then we're going to be told, well, in order to do that, we need to import a load more people to do it. And so then what happens is constantly chasing our tail on this, aren't we?
Yeah, 10 years ago, I was in a hotel bar in London talking to the senior CFO of a large-scale housing company that's on the FTSE, and they said then that if you wanted to try and reduce prices in housing, you had to build 1 million houses or apartments in London. That's the number that you used in your heading tonight, 10 years later. And the reason for that, he said, is because we just don't have enough space and housing in the areas where people want to live. And that's a contrary argument, because if you want people to go and live in a nice countryside area in the middle of Wales, there's no jobs for them there. There's no infrastructure for them there. There's no schools for them there. Scotland is the country that's declining in terms of population in here. No one's wanting to live up there. Actually, there's more deaths than there are births, as we've just seen in the report from the ONS. Shove them all up there if you want. Let's take 1.5 of those unemployed people who have come from different countries and let them work up there. But they can't. So that's where the lie to this argument comes in. They want to live in the metropolitan areas where we can't house them.
Well, that's but migration is also internal. People have been migrating to the cities from the countryside for centuries. You know, since before the
with a
Industrial
job, though,
Revolution.
a lot of the time.
Not necessarily.
You move having got a job. That's how most people do it.
People move and look for jobs.
Most people will not move to London voluntarily without a job. Like the only appeal of London, the only appeal of London is a job, because London, it's a crap hole.
Okay,
I don't say that.
It is.
Oh, well, you know, it might be going that way. But
am I going to defend something in Britain against the panel for once?
I think go on.
I won't hear a word said against London. It's the best city in the world.
OK, fantastic. One of our presenters got mugged on the other side of the street just a couple of days ago. But you know what? Fine. Absolutely. It's lovely. All right, chaps, good start again. And
Never happened in the North, I guess.
Never happened in the North. No. They just pour gravy over you. Right, it's time for today's Great British Giveaway.